The hall was silent, except for the soft hum of anticipation. Cameras flashed, journalists murmured, and staff moved briskly behind the scenes. It was one of those rare meetings. Former President Barack Obama had agreed to meet with Elon Musk in a closed-door conversation about the future of humanity, faith, and innovation. The room was a blend of legacy and vision, but no one expected what would happen next. In the far corner, quietly observing the exchange between the two men, stood a boy. Tousled hair, mismatched socks, and a face that held more questions than answers. It was X, Elon Musk's son. While the world speculated about electric cars, Mars colonies, and AI, X was busy scribbling something on a small piece of paper with a crayon he found in the hotel's kids' corner. Elon noticed, smiled slightly, but said nothing. He was used to X's curiosity, but even he didn't expect his son to walk forward. "Excuse me," X whispered, tugging gently on Obama's suit jacket. The room froze. Obama looked down, startled, but his eyes immediately softened. "Yes, young man?" X looked up, eyes wide and honest. His voice was calm, but carried the kind of weight that only children can deliver. Unfiltered truth, wrapped in innocence. "Do you remember what it feels like, to believe in something so big it hurts?" The silence deepened. Cameras stopped clicking. Elon blinked, surprised. Obama crouched down, his face now inches from the boy's. "What do you mean?" Obama asked gently. "I wrote you something," X said, handing him the crumpled note. "My dad says the world is complicated, and people forget to listen. But I think God made us to love, not just build stuff. I wanted to ask you something grown-ups don't talk about." He paused, his eyes shining with something deep, almost too big for a child. "Do you still talk to God? Or did you stop when the world got too loud?" Obama slowly opened the note. Elon stepped forward instinctively, but stopped himself. His heart was racing. There were 1,000 cameras outside. 1,000,000 people would see whatever came next. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Obama's hands trembled just slightly as he unfolded the note. There was only one line. "If we build everything, but forget to love, did we really build anything at all?" Tears welled in Obama's eyes. He looked up at X, then at Elon, and then back down at the note. The weight of decades, decisions, and disillusionments seemed to rest on his shoulders. "I think," Obama whispered, voice cracking, "you just asked the one question none of us could afford to answer out loud." And just like that, the conversation shifted, not toward politics or science, but something deeper, something eternal. Elon Musk sat quietly beside his son, watching the way Barack Obama folded the small note with almost sacred care. The former president's hands, usually so confident and assured, trembled ever so slightly. He looked like a man who had just been reminded of something he'd buried deep, not out of denial, but out of necessity. Elon leaned forward slightly. "He wrote that last night," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "Didn't show it to anyone. Just said he had something important to ask." Obama nodded, his eyes never leaving X. "Why'd you write it, X?" he asked gently. X looked at the two men, one who shaped the nation, the other reshaping the world, and said, "I hear people talking about the future like it's a machine, but machines don't hug you when you cry. I wanted to ask if we're building a future where people still feel safe to feel things." Obama blinked back tears. "That's a powerful thought." "Is it wrong?" the boy asked. "No," Obama said, shaking his head. "It's not wrong. It's brave." Then he glanced at Elon. "You raised him to think like that?" Elon half smiled. "Honestly, he teaches me more than I teach him." Obama chuckled softly, but the smile faded as quickly as it came. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to ask those questions too. But the world has a way of making you choose between truth and survival, between faith and control." X tilted his head. "But doesn't truth help you survive?" Obama hesitated. The room grew still again. "It should," he said, "but sometimes truth makes you vulnerable. And when you lead millions, you start to fear vulnerability. You hide from it. You forget what it feels like to pray without asking for something in return." There was a long pause. Then X asked the question that landed like thunder in the silent room. "Do you think Jesus was ever afraid to tell the truth?" Elon's eyes widened. Obama looked stunned. "Where did you hear that?" he asked. X shrugged. "I read, and I listen when people cry. A lot of people say they believe in Jesus, but I wonder if they really listen to what he said. He didn't just talk about heaven, he talked about hearts, about forgiveness, about how love is the only thing that doesn't break when the world does." Obama sat back slowly, visibly shaken. "I haven't thought about that in a long time," he admitted. "When I was young, I used to sit under a tree with my grandfather and read the Sermon on the Mount. I believed back then that love could change the world." X looked at him, wide-eyed. "So, why did we stop trying?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Elon leaned back, his face unreadable, but his hand reached out and gently rested on his son's shoulder. A quiet gesture of pride and maybe a little fear. They were entering a conversation most adults never dared to have, not publicly, and it had only just begun. Obama's hands were folded now, the note resting between them like a fragile memory. His gaze wandered to the large window behind Elon and X, where the evening light poured in. Dust danced in the air like particles of time, tiny moments, forgotten. "You know," he said quietly, "I think we stopped trying when we started thinking that love wasn't efficient. That compassion was a weakness instead of a strength." Elon spoke for the first time in a while. "I've seen that. I felt it too. There's this idea that to move forward, you have to leave the soft parts of yourself behind. That faith is impractical. That emotion clouds logic. But," he looked at X, "what if emotion is the compass, not the obstacle?" X was staring down at his shoes, thinking. "Jesus didn't run companies," he said suddenly, "but he still changed everything." Obama smiled gently. "No, he didn't run companies, but he knew people. He saw through them, not to judge, but to understand. That kind of sight, we don't teach it anymore." He paused, then turned to X. "What made you ask that question today? Why me?" The boy hesitated, then he looked up with quiet honesty. "Because I saw you cry on the news once. You were holding a microphone and you tried to talk, but you had to stop. People were angry at you for crying, but I wasn't. I thought maybe you still feel things like the rest of us." Obama blinked. That memory, the one he'd tried to push away, came flooding back. The Sandy Hook shooting, 20 children, a press conference, tears that wouldn't stay hidden. He remembered thinking at the time, what kind of leader breaks down in front of the world? But now, hearing it through the voice of a child, it didn't sound like weakness. It sounded like proof that something was still alive in him. "I remember that," Obama said slowly. "It was one of the hardest moments of my life. I didn't cry because I was weak. I cried because I couldn't find the words anymore. Nothing felt like enough." X nodded. "Sometimes silence says more." Obama looked at him in awe. "You're a lot older than you look, kid," X giggled. "That's what my mom says." Then he turned serious. "Do you ever talk to God now?" Obama hesitated. Then, almost reluctantly, he said, "Not as much as I should." "Why not?" "Because sometimes I'm afraid he might ask me to do something hard, something I don't feel strong enough for anymore." The room grew heavy with truth. Elon finally spoke again, his voice soft. "Maybe we're all just waiting for someone else to go first." X looked between them. "But Jesus went first, didn't he?" Obama looked at Elon. Elon looked at Obama. And in that moment, it was clear. The boy had not just come to ask a question. He had come to remind them of something they'd forgotten. The room was quiet again, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was sacred. The kind of silence that doesn't ask to be broken, but invites people to lean into it. Obama sat still, his face turned toward the window. Elon's hand remained gently on X's shoulder, and the boy, he just watched them both, not with judgment, but with the wide-open patience only children seem to carry. "I used to pray before speeches," Obama said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not for applause, not for victory, just for the courage to mean what I say." X looked up. "Do you still mean what you say now?" Obama hesitated. It was the kind of question adults often dodge, but this child didn't let him. X's eyes were waiting, not for the polished answer, but the real one. "Sometimes," Obama said. "Other times, I say what I think people need to hear, but I don't always believe it in my bones." Elon nodded slowly. I've done the same. It's easier to build rockets than it is to tell the truth about your own soul. X looked confused. Why is truth so hard if it's real? Elon turned to him, his expression tender but serious. Because truth changes things. Once you say it, things can't go back to the way they were. And change scares people. Obama looked at Elon. Do you believe in God? The question was sudden. Elon didn't flinch. I believe, he said carefully, that something greater than us gave us the capacity to love, to build, to question, to forgive. I believe Jesus showed us how to live, not through control, but through compassion. X turned to Obama. Do you believe that? Obama smiled. I believe Jesus knew something we forgot, that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, over and over again, even when it hurts. The boy nodded, like he understood more than they thought he could. Then he whispered, My teacher said the world is broken, but I think it's just waiting. Waiting for what? Obama asked. For someone to care more than they're afraid. That landed like a stone in the water, rippling through the grown men like prophecy. Obama folded the note again, but this time he held it with both hands, not like paper, like treasure. I want to tell you something, he said to X. When I was president, I met kings, billionaires, scientists, celebrities, but none of them ever asked me that question. Not one. X looked down, shy now. You asked it with love, Obama added, and that's what broke me. Outside, a storm had started. Soft thunder rolled above the clouds, but inside the room there was calm. Elon looked at his son, then at Obama. This isn't just a moment, he said. This is a shift. I think the world needs to hear this. Obama looked thoughtful. Maybe it's time we stop giving speeches and start telling the truth. The storm outside tapped gently against the windows now, like nature itself was listening. Inside the room, no one reached for their phones. No one checked their watches. Time for a moment felt like it had paused to let something sacred unfold. Obama turned the note over one more time, tracing the edges with his fingers. You know, he said, I used to think leadership was about having the answers. Now I wonder if it's about asking better questions. X sat cross-legged in his chair, fidgeting slightly but still focused. That's what my dad says, that questions are how we learn to listen before we try to fix things. Elon smiled faintly. He's been asking questions since he could talk. Hard ones. Ones I don't always know how to answer. X turned to him. That's because grown-ups think they have to know everything. But maybe God doesn't want us to know everything. Maybe he just wants us to care enough to ask. Obama looked at Elon. You raised a boy who doesn't just think, he feels. That's rare. Elon shook his head. I didn't raise him to be like this. He chose to be like this. Somewhere along the way, I realized that I was teaching him how to reach the stars, but he was teaching me how not to lose my soul on the way there. There was a beat of silence. Obama leaned forward. X, can I ask you something? The boy nodded. Why now? Why did you decide today was the day to give me this note? X bit his lip. Because I saw you smile in the hallway, but your eyes looked sad, and I think sometimes people smile so the sadness doesn't spill out. I thought maybe you needed someone to notice. Obama's jaw tightened, and his voice cracked. I did, I really did. Then, turning to Elon, he said something softer than anyone expected from a man who once led the free world. I think this is the first conversation I've had in years where I didn't feel like I had to perform. Elon met his eyes. Maybe that's because, for once, none of us are trying to be anything other than human. X tilted his head. Isn't that what Jesus wanted? For us to stop pretending and start being honest? Obama let out a breath. Yes, but somewhere along the way, we turned his teachings into competition, arguments, politics. We forgot that his power was in his gentleness. Like washing people's feet? X asked. Yes, Obama whispered. Exactly like that. X thought for a moment. So if we're not willing to kneel, maybe we're not ready to lead? It was more than a question. It was a mirror. Elon exhaled deeply, rubbing his temples. That's the kind of truth that keeps me up at night. Outside, the storm softened, like even the sky was exhaling. Obama looked at X, his voice quiet and full of reverence. You didn't just bring me a note, son. You brought me back to something I thought I lost. Morning light filtered through the clouds as the storm passed. The world outside was still waking up, but inside that quiet room, something had already shifted. Not with noise, not with headlines, but with one small note, written by a child who saw what most adults never stop to feel. Obama stood up slowly, still holding the paper. He looked at Elon, then down at X. "I want to ask you something," he said, his tone steady but sincere. "Can I keep this?" X smiled and nodded. "It's yours now." Elon spoke gently. "Are you sure, X? You might want to keep it?" The boy shook his head. It already did what it was supposed to do. Obama clutched the note like it was more valuable than any award or medal he'd ever received. "What did it do?" "It made you remember," X said, "and it made you feel. That's enough." There was something profound in the boy's simplicity. He wasn't trying to change the world with power or technology. He just wanted people to remember that hearts matter more than headlines. Obama glanced at Elon. "You once said that we have to colonize Mars to secure the future of humanity. But what if the real mission is making sure humanity doesn't forget how to love?" Elon nodded slowly. "Mars is part of the journey, but if we get there and leave behind what makes us human, we've already lost." There was a knock on the door. A staffer peeked in. "They're ready for you, Mr. President." Obama turned toward the door, then paused. "Tell them I'll be a minute." He knelt, not to pray, not to tie a shoe, but to look X in the eyes. "Never stop asking questions," he said. "Never stop listening. And no matter how loud the world gets, and keep that kind of heart." X smiled softly. "Only if you promise to remember what you felt today." "I promise," Obama whispered. He stood, turned toward Elon, and offered his hand. "Thank you for letting him speak. You didn't just raise a boy. You let him stay soft in a world that tries to harden everyone." Elon shook his hand, but his eyes were on X. "He reminds me of what I almost forgot, that the future we build means nothing if love doesn't lead it." Obama opened the door. Cameras waited, lights flashed, but before he stepped out, he turned back one last time. "I'm not going to tell the press what he wrote," he said. "Not yet. I think the world's not ready to hear it until it feels it." And with that, he stepped out into the noise, carrying a note in his pocket and something far heavier in his heart. Elon looked down at his son. "You okay?" X nodded. "Yeah. What are you thinking?" X looked out the window. "Just wondering how many people it takes to remind the world that God is still speaking. Maybe we just forgot how to listen." Elon didn't answer. He just stared at his son and quietly gave thanks.